Good morning, Old Fisherman with you. I want to show you some old plugs here. My daddy's old plugs. Look at them right here. They wood plugs. They're not in good shape. But some old plugs from the past, back in the 60s and the 50s. I don't even know the names of all of them. There's old Topwater Plug, ZZ Top here, and homemade plugs here that he made. Old stuff. It's an old mirror lure right here. Mirror lure. And little crankbaits and stuff made out of wood with metal lips. We got all different kinds here. They old, and this is an old pike bait. We used to troll with these jokers and catch them. This it looks like a homemade lead bait that sunk. They're in bad shape. Some of them dirty. Some of them's not too bad. And here's old like a spinner bait with a Hawaiian wiggler. It's called a Hawaiian wiggler. You put a pork rind on it, and they used to catch them in with that thing. And a little artificial minnow with a spinner on the front called Brooks number 4. Used to be a good plug. This is a heading vamp lure. Heading vamp. Little crankbaits. I don't know the name of all of them, I'll be honest with you. Then they had the metal plugs they used to troll with. And we used to have us a ball catching them with those plugs. And I got some, if I can find it, I got plenty more old plugs here. My daddy, when we was a kid, I'm gonna pull it out here. I got it in a box over here. When we was a kid, he used to make his own spinners, and we used to troll with them. All he done was put a little spinner on a wire, and made his own spinner out of piano wire, and he put a little lead swivel on front of one of them, and we used to catch 2 at a time white bass trolling back in the 50s with this. When I was a young kid, we trolled with it, and the piano wire kept the plugs apart. And he twisted it and made his own little rig back then with piano wire. You see the little homemade spinner plugs? They homemade, all that's homemade with a couple swivels. We used to use that a lot. Caught a lot of fish on that. And, a super dude, we used to bump the bottom like I do with a spoon now. We used to bump the bottom with this, and I guarantee you still catch them with that. Caught a many fish with that. Look at these plugs. They're unique. They all old, real old. You got these old big diving plugs made of metal. You got to love that. That joker that's got some eyes on it. And these big doggone old, I call them crankbaits with the lips. All different types here. Right here is a heading river rat or river something. I can't even read it. It's some kind of, all of them's caught fish. Let me tell you, these particular plugs have caught fish. They bruised all up. You can tell it was in Daddy's tackle box, and he caught a lot of fish back then with these old plugs. And but they get hooked up on everything. Right there's an old brook. They call it the Brooks bait. Ain't a thing but like a doggone crankbait. That's all it is. It don't look like the modern day crankbaits, that's for sure. Old pike bait. Good Topwater plugs when they're hitting something small. You got they fancy looking. Got wires sticking out where it gives them more action. And there's a homemade one carved out of wood. Daddy probably made it. Like a Topwater plug, carved out of wood. And of course the old Topwater plug here, it's all, you can tell that caught a many fish. Yeah, it's all wore off, the paint's wore off of it. Caught a lot of fish. Here's what they call the ZZ Top back in the olden days. I won a bass tournament on that ZZ Top. About 10 years ago. Nobody had one because they don't make them no more, I don't think. But here's one with 5 sets of hooks. That thing's got hooks everywhere. Topwater Plug. 5 sets of hooks. This one looks like a frog, Topwater Plug. And here's an old big pipe bait. A big old bait there. All styles, all shapes. It's amazing how they used to make these old baits. Here's a daggone, looks like a little devil's horse, but it's got lead in it, sinks to the bottom, and you jerk it across the bottom. Daddy used to kill the bass from about 12 foot of water on them humps with that. And there's another little crankbait, a big crankbait. Some of them got some pretty colors to them. But they wood, that's wood. Some of them's wood. This is an old darting plug, made of wood. Another homemade plug, made of wood. And I've got some of the spoons I use. This is some of the spoons I use in Monticello with my 3 rig. That's a heavy one. That's about a 1 ounce. That's a little heavy. And right here's a 3/4. Both of these come from Academy Sports. They not but a couple bucks. That's why I use them. I use the berry spoons. You can use the Hopkins spoon. I use the silver Hopkins, the gold Hopkins. And here's a little power bait jig. I use that a lot. That's modern day stuff. And there's a jig head that I use that's a 1/4 ounce. The bigger the head, the less it tangles up your line. And when the shad get bigger, like in January, February, deep water, it's a good jig head to use. And a light round. There's another 1/4 with black and yellow. And now here's one, the jig head that comes from Academy Sports. And it's got the little prong, got the bottom and the top to hold the jig. And I like to use that with my gut shrimp. And that's a 1/4 ounce, and there's an 1/8 of an ounce. The 1/8 of an ounce is probably the best all around. And they go all the way down to a 1/16 of an ounce with that particular jig. This is the You Got to Love It jig that I've been catching. I made myself, and I got it on that Academy Sports jig head, the H2O head, I believe they call it. And it's on the line with a lead, and then the swivel up here. So I got about 16 inches to my jig, and that's the way I do it. I put a swivel, lead, and one jig by itself. Or if I want 2 jigs on there, I'll take 2 lines off of it, take the lead off. That's what I do. And here's an old rod that Daddy had years ago. The thing ain't but about 2 foot. It's a glass rod. I've got some metal rods out there somewhere, but this is a glass rod with an old reel. When you cast these old reels, the handles is from Ocean City, but the handles will turn when you cast it. And my daddy used to be an expert throwing them things. The handle would turn, you got to keep away from it, but he could throw them like that and it wouldn't backlash. Nowadays, you know, they done got real modern with all of that, but that's some of my old jig heads. And just want to talk to you a little bit about them. But if you want, you got to make sure when you tie these jigs on, and here's a Bobby Garland jig on the 16th head. That's the head I like for crappies, 32nd or 16th with the Bobby Garland, and I use that jig or that head, or just a lead head is good too. You don't need these colored heads. Lead heads probably work better, that's my opinion. But although I'm using the white heads on my gut shrimp and all that. And there's a Mr. Crappie. I catch so many on the Mr. Crappie. And I'll show you that the Mr. Crappie will work real good. And I'll put one on for you on this doggone 1/8 of an ounce head. I like these 1/8 heads because I like the black ones too, the different ones with just 1 prong sticking out. But the 2 prongs with this 1/8, you go all the way down it, and then when you push it up on it, it sets on there perfect. And I always like my tail. A lot of people I see have the tails up. I like mine down. My tail down. That's the way I do it right there. That when I'm doing a double rig and I got a Mr. Crappie on, or a gut shrimp will go on that same head. That's the way I put it. So just a few little things I want to show y'all. The Old Fisherman is brought out some of his daddy's old lures, and listen, I got a box full of them. That's just a few. I got about 180 to 200 of them old jigs and lures and stuff. And just something I wanted to show you. I had a pretty good day today. We caught, I think, 4 or 5 bass, a couple of crappies, a few perch, and then I broke my casting rod today, so not a good day. But hey, got to replace it. We'll see you. This is Old Fisherman. Back with you again another time.